Today we're traveling to the Catskills, where artist and author Heather Ross has created a storybook home that feels timeless and full of soul. Raised in rural Vermont, Heather's deep connection to nature has always guided her eye, and when she first discovered this crumbling old house, she saw past the decay to the beauty waiting within. Over the past 15 years, she and her family have brought it back to life layer by layer, turning every corner into a reflection of their story. Filled with vintage finds, heirlooms, and her own beloved textiles, Heather's home is a warm, imaginative retreat, a place where artistry and comfort live side by side. To watch Heather's full episode ad-free, scan the QR code or click the join button below. You're watching Homeworthy, where we believe every home has a story. I'm Allison Kenworthy, the founder of Homeworthy, and we take you inside the world's most beautifully decorated homes and introduce you to the brilliant people who live there.
Hi Homeworthy, I'm Liz Lang. Welcome to Grey Gardens.
Click the join button below to access all of our latest episodes ad-free and watch extended cuts of this and other homes, opening the doors to new rooms and exclusive content featuring our beloved hosts.
I can't wait to see, I'm so excited.
And if you're looking to shop items inspired by this and other Homeworthy tastemakers, be sure to use the product links below or scan the QR code on screen to find fabulous furniture, coffee table books, and accessories that can transform your house into a home.
Hi Homeworthy, I'm Heather. Welcome to my house in the Catskills. Come on in. Hi, I'm Heather Ross. I'm an artist and an author, and welcome to my home in the Catskills. In 2005, 2006, I got engaged to someone who was at the time living and working in New York City. And I'd always wanted to live in New York City, but what I couldn't get my head around was spending a summer in New York City. I'd grown up on a really big, beautiful rural piece of property in northern Vermont, very feral, very unsupervised type of childhood with lots of friends and cousins around. And I just didn't understand how you could live somewhere where you couldn't go and jump into a river or a lake any time of the day. It made no sense. So as soon as we got engaged and we realized that his job was going to keep him in New York City, and these feel like the olden days now. I mean, we lived in this little apartment in Chelsea. I would walk him to Penn Station, where he took the train every morning to go up to his office in Midtown. He wore a three-piece suit. I can't even imagine. Now he's like, he works from home. I can't even remember what those days were like. They were so different. But anyway, during the summer, it was just a non-starter for me. He felt like he needed to stay in New York at least a few more years. I just couldn't imagine how we were going to make that work in the summer. So we started on a really small budget. We started taking drives on the weekends and looking for something that we could afford. There was no way that we were going to get anywhere close to the Hamptons. That was completely priced out, or the Jersey Shore, or any of it, really. We headed for the western part of the Catskills. The Catskills are big, right? We headed for the western side, the Sullivan County, Delaware River sort of side. We knew there were a lot of really interesting things going on there. We knew there were a lot of lakes and rivers, and we knew that there were some really affordable houses still. It was still a pretty economically depressed place. Most of the resorts had shut down. It was like Dirty Dancing, but it had all sort of contracted over the years and changed. So there were good deals. And we saw a few houses and none of them really hit home. And then we found this house, which was literally a ruin. It was very close to being torn down. My neighbors, it's part of a lake community. My neighbors, one of them in particular, really didn't want to see it knocked down. He'd grown up here. He'd loved being inside of this house. He knew what a gem it was. And he was just so sad. He'd watched it over the years just be abandoned and neglected and abused. And it really couldn't bear it. So he convinced everyone to pitch in and put a new roof on the place just so it wouldn't fall down. And that's where it was when we found it. And We could see that it had really good bones. We could see that the structure itself was really sound, but it had been completely gutted. There were animals living inside. There was a obese groundhog on the porch that really stood his ground, like couldn't understand why we wanted to go inside. There were skeletons everywhere. Upstairs, we found that most of the house had been stripped down to the studs, but the previous owner had saved everything, every piece of trim, every piece of molding. And it was crazy. We weren't really in a position in terms of our time or money. We really weren't in a position to take on a project like this. But for whatever reason, it almost felt like a rescue dog, which we also had at the time. It almost felt like a place that if we saved it, it would almost be like we had created it from scratch in a way. So we did. We spent everything we had in basically insulating it, putting in a radiant heat system, just getting it to the point where it was livable. And then over the last 15 years, we have just room by room and piece by piece, we've put it together in a way that works for us. And our favorite thing about it is that it's not an option really to buy anything new for this house. If you put anything brand new into this house, if it's not an antique, if it isn't just a little bit dinged up or torn or stained, it looks totally out of place. So we have what we wanted, which was a place that feels where there's just nothing. It's beautiful, and in some ways it's grand, but nothing is precious. Everything is washable. We have a ton of animals. We have, tons of kids in and out all the time. Nothing is precious. That's always the goal. And then every bit, every sconce, every textile, like everything is kind of an opportunity for me to explore all of my interests, which as a textile designer and a quilting fabric designer is so much fun. And my family's gotten really used to things changing all the time. Rooms change, uses change. But the thing that remains constant is that we have all of our family. I have so many nieces. We have this big pack of young, wonderful women who come and stay every summer. So most of what I do with all of them in mind. And the kids that are in this community who I've watched grow up, who are so special. And it's become really, really wonderful. We saw the potential in this place. I think everyone did. It was just a matter of taking on the job of it all. And we've gotten to a point where we've realized it and we love it. And it takes it out of us every year. It really does. But it feels now that it's really kind of coming into its own. This room is sort of an entrance hall meets gathering place meets hangout space. It's hard for me to imagine exactly what it was intended for, but here's how I use it. I really like, especially in the summertime, to create a sense of like no real clear line between inside and outside. And this table really helps me do that. I wanted something central that just made people feel like they were welcome and comfortable. It is a very bizarre collection of things. We have birds' nests that have fallen out of trees in front of us. The feathers from some very unfortunate little finch, probably. My daughter and I went through a major paper mache period. This is one of my most favorite books in the world. It's called Muriel Foster's Fishing Diary, and Muriel Foster was a real person. She lived in the country in England, and when she died, her family published this. She would go out every day fishing and hunting, and instead of using the book the way that it was designed to be used, which is where you keep track of where you caught fish and how big they were, she sketched and watercolored everything that she saw. And they were really true to form when they reproduced it. They reproduced it in a way where it's all of her original notes. It's such a treasure. It's one of my favorite gifts to give. I just feel like it's a whole life lived. This really unusual, incredible person. We also keep things like every single lunchbox note that I wrote my daughter is in here. It's just like, it's all that stuff that you don't really know what to do with. This is a portrait that my friend Vera Brosgwald did of my daughter with our dog when he was in his last moments. We have a tradition in this family at Christmas time of making really complex snowflakes. This is my husband and one of our dogs. we get actually kind of grossly competitive about it. I do a portrait of my daughter every year on her birthday. This was from a few years ago. This is ballpoint pen, which I don't work in a lot, but I really, really love. This table is really meant as a sort of a collector's surface. We love it when people bring things in. I found this at this incredible antique sale. This is a vase that is meant to display just a single feather. I asked someone who knows a lot about these things if it was meant for like a feather that you write with. It's not. It's just meant to display one singular, beautiful feather. And I also like keeping things for my guests, like a little field guide, so I don't get a lot of tree questions. I can defer to that. And usually my clippers are here because my favorite thing to do in the morning is to wander outside in my pajamas and cut hydrangeas and ferns. I like it to feel useful and really personal, and everyone is welcome to put stuff here. We've had a lot of odd stuff over the years. It's also attached to this section of the house, which in my mind is just like an indoor porch, which I love, and it's just connected to our entry hall. I love that it's really inviting. It just sort of wants to bring you outside, which I adore. These two chests belong to my grandparents, and they're just perfect here. I love them. So as a textile artist, I started exploring with taking some of my textile designs and turning them into wallpapers. I've started doing this a few years ago, and it started here in this house. This house is very much sort of a laboratory for me. This is actually a photograph of a screen that was found in an old, really beautiful old Japanese house that's not far from me that was once part of a World's Fair. It's a long story. It's called Shofuden, if you want to look it up. And I loved it. And there was a brief period of time when no one was there and it was sort of in flux, and they let me go in and take some photographs. And then I took those photographs and I brought them into Photoshop and I printed them onto peel and stick wallpaper. And I love that it has just like a little bit of our local kind of community history. Everything else is a bit of a mishmash. It's a rug that isn't quite the right size but works. This is really meant to just lead you, encourage you outside. It's a shame that you're not here at sunset, because at exactly 15 minutes before the sun sets every night, it comes right through this window, and this disco ball turns this room into a glittering sea of silver confetti. It's so fun. We call it disco o'clock, and my daughter stands on the table, or did when she was little, and gives it a spin, and it's this super magical moment. But really what we're always trying to do is just encourage outside use. Our porch is really, I think, the prettiest spot in the house. And this is a blanket that used to sit in the back of my grandmother's car. It's an old-fashioned car blanket. She hated being in cars, and I love that I have it to keep warm. This was her chair too, which I really love. The style doesn't match perfectly, but it works because it was hers. I have a painting of her over here, actually. My mother gave this to me as a wedding gift because she said, "What do you want for your wedding?" And I said, "I think I want that portrait of Grandma." And she said, "Okay." And she put it in the back of her car and brought it to my wedding, literally, which was great. I love that she looks a little bit bored and disinterested, because that's very much what she was. She was pretty disinterested most of the time, but she loved to travel. She lived all over the world, and she had incredible taste. And I think most of the things that I grew up around that were so inspiring to me were hers. And I don't know if this makes sense to a lot of people, but seeing like tiny little fireflies and butterflies painted on things and little birds, this was the kind of thing as a child that just made me feel so seen. It just made me feel like the things that I cared about were important and were celebrated. The last time we used this tea set, by the way, was for my 14-year-old daughter's birthday party. We really don't bust out a tea service on a regular basis, but it makes me really happy to have it here. One of the amazing miracles in this house is this stained glass. When we bought this house, it was so derelict, and the fact that this stained glass was so well preserved is both shocking and really beneficial financially, because I don't know how we would ever have it prepared. It's very rare, apparently. I did a little bit of research. It's very rare to see lilies in stained glass. in a house like this. Lilies are usually meant for stained glass in cemeteries and in, mausoleums. But the name of the woman who built this house was Lillian. So she convinced the stained glass artist to let her have a couple of lilies, which I love. I love this so much. It's actually lit from the outside as well. So at night, you can come up the stairs and it just kind of glows. One of the reasons, even though this house was in such bad shape, and I mean, you just can't even imagine. I have photos. One of the reasons I knew that it had been really well built was because of this stained glass over here that's over the door. There was an organ here, but it wasn't savable, unfortunately. Well, actually, probably for the better. Not a big fan of organ music. On this side, the stained glass matches all of the colors that were inside this house, the reds, the greens. But can I bring you back outside? Is that possible? This is so crazy to me. And this was really the clincher for me. The ceilings in most porches are painted blue, and that's meant to deter the sparrows from building nests, I think. I've heard that. I wish I knew if it was absolutely true. Because the ceiling was blue, it's a little bit of a lighter blue now, the stained glass, this is the same stained glass on this side, has blue in it. And I thought, if someone put that much effort and care, then this place must be built to last forever. I loved that. I loved that just tiny little design, that successful design, but also the fact that someone just cared that much really meant something to me. The woodwork in this room and in the other room are obviously totally original. It's all sort of arts and crafts, beaux arts. We have not refinished this wood. This is original to 1906. So this is sort of our entry hall. This is most of the time the first room that people see. And I feel like it tells the story of the house. I love it. I love welcoming people in this room. We also have really good parties in this room. So this room was definitely meant to be a formal dining room, and it has the best views of the sunset. It's really designed to be in that early evening, but we really don't have the use for an inside dining room, a really formal dining room, especially one of this size. So we use it as a family room, and it gets a lot of play, especially in the wintertime. This bar cabinet was built specifically for the house, as were a lot of other things like doors, and I love it so much. I've tried to create a real kind of a cocktail moment. I feel like people are drinking less and less though, so it's also becoming a little more of a knick-knack moment. I love this. This is George Caldwell, and he is not the original owner, but he was the one that owned this place from the 1930s-ish from right after the Great Depression all the way up until the early 70s. He had died by then, but his family was still here. And I did a bunch of research on him, and I found out that he had a mistress in town, and she was an artist. And then I found out that she died and that there was going to be an estate sale. And of course I had to go. So I have his picture here, and I have her beautiful little individually hand-painted little bowls here, which I love. And they're all totally original. And I know nothing about their relationship. And I'm certainly not saying that people should have a mistress, but I do kind of love that they get to live together in my bar cabinet in their former life. This was a piece that I inherited from my grandmother. It is either a totally invaluable piece of Mexican beanware or Ming Dynasty. The notes got mixed up on them and no one's totally clear. I love that it sits next to a little painting that I found at a thrift store for $5. I'm a big fan of that. Most of the barware has been sort of collected. A lot of it was here. They were clearly really big drinkers, bigger drinkers than we are. We have this great little trophy up here that I'm very proud of. I did not win it, or I was not involved in any aspect of winning of it, but it's amazing for putting champagne in with a little bit of snow or ice. My favorite light fixtures in the house are these ferns. I got the pair of them at a vintage store at a place called Town and Country in Liberty, New York. I have a really talented decorating friend, Elizabeth Balanino, who's a really close friend and just a world-class decorator. she's really recommended that I paint these cheesy white candlesticks for a long time. I know they bother her when she's here, but I kind of like that they're like a little cheesy. The furniture has been swapped out in this room many times because we have dogs and kids. We try to keep everything really easy, and we try not to keep anything precious. That's really our main goal. And we like to decorate as though we still have small children. My daughter and I spent a lot of time sending little stick boats and paper boats down the river. So I made us a special customized set. This is our whole family, including the mouse that was living in her closet for a while. We really, in a grand house like this, we're always looking for opportunities to make it feel just a little silly and a little childish, which everyone seems to appreciate. So this chair I kind of love the way it's fading with the light coming in all the time. When I'm here alone, this is where I go. This is one of my quilts. This is, I don't know, 10, 15 years old. It's got holes everywhere. It's the best. I keep it here because it's the one thing in the house that I'm totally allowed to spill coffee on and let my dog sleep under. That's the goal. I also have this one. This is my fabrics, but the quilt design is by Denise Schmidt, who is like the mother of modern quilting. So gifted. And this bench, which I love, which mostly gets action with the dogs and the cats, this was this beautiful rug that my friend Annabelle found. It was so beautiful, but it was really ripped up. So I asked my friend who does upholstery to make it into a bench for me, and I love the way it turned out. It's really, really one of my favorite pieces. I like drawing my family more than my family likes being drawn by me, but I did this one before I knew that. This is a little watercolor that I did of my husband on our first weekend away together before we were engaged, or it's a really long time ago. It's this really funny day where we went out in this little rowboat. He's Irish. He doesn't like to be directly in the sun. And my goal was that we were going to go out in this rowboat and he was going to row me around this little lake in Vermont. But instead, he was so sensitive to the sun that we rowed around that entire lake with him holding the umbrella that we had been told was in the rowboat and me rowing the whole time. And when he opened the umbrella, it was like a child's ladybug umbrella. And I rowed him around this entire lake with him holding this tiny. And I still, at the end of that boat ride, I thought, well, if I'm still really attracted to him after that, like I should definitely get married to this guy. And it's worked out really well. Personally, I wish we'd kept the umbrella. This is one of my favorites. So this is by Paul Moreau. I know that I'm not pronouncing that right. I'm so sorry. Textile designer who was prolific and responsible for so many of the beautiful Parisian, like hand-painted, hand-drawn silk fabric pattern designs in the mid-century. Just like the most stunning color combinations. In fact, you'll see my bedroom upstairs, the colors, and in my kitchen to some degree, are really pulled directly from this palette. I spent a lot of time in Mexico as a kid, and that like hot raspberry, that unusual like magenta-ish pink is like embedded into the back of my brain. It's everywhere. Pink is sort of everywhere for me. It's kind of my black. It's kind of my standard color. I love the way this piece takes over a room. This is from, if you're curious, Natural Curiosities, which is a company that finds a lot of this old beautiful art and reproduces it in just really nicely, really high quality reproductions, and they do beautiful, all sorts of different frames for different styled houses. And this has been with me now for a while. I love it so much. I think the best compliment I've ever gotten about my home was probably from my friend Angela, who was sitting in my living room and looked at me and said, "I feel like I've been coming here my whole life." And that felt so good. It felt so good. And that's, having someone as like me and my husband, we both moved around so much as kids and even as adults. And to feel that sense of familiarity and more importantly, that sense of belonging, I think is so important to me. So originally the kitchen was actually like 4 or 5 little small rooms, and they were all work rooms, and they were all really specific to different things. And then the yard off of the side was where the chickens were. And obviously it's a totally different situation now. We ripped everything out and really started from scratch in here. And then unfortunately this last year, everything flooded. So we just renovated it, which wasn't that big of a tragedy actually, because the amount of effort and time and money that it took to get the place livable meant that we'd been living for about 12 years with the kitchen that I had essentially set up for my contractors when we first bought the place, just as a place for them to have lunch and make coffee. So it was basically just like an IKEA countertop on wobbly legs and like whatever else we could find. So it's really nice to finally have a kitchen that we really, really love. I used IKEA cabinets and semi-handmade doors, which was so great. Working with both of those companies on this kitchen was so satisfying. I didn't hire a kitchen designer. I knew that I wanted it to feel like less like a kitchen and more like a hangout space. I can show you what I do. I do this in every kitchen now. It's my favorite thing. I'm a big appliance person. I don't love looking at my appliances though, so I love an upper cabinet where I can store all of my seltzer maker, Nespresso, and then my husband is a smoothie freak, so we have a little smoothie section and a microwave. Everything that would normally be on the counters is up high. I have almost given myself a concussion trying to get that KitchenAid out of there though, so I think we might need to find a better solution there at some point. And then this is a portrait I did of my dog, my love of my life, Lobo. He's with me now. It took a couple years before I could hang it, but I can now. This piece is it's another reproduction. It's a guy, he's on Etsy, and he is reproducing this group of art that hung in a palace in Japan. He was sent by an emperor to take essentially half his lifetime to illustrate every plant known in Japan. And this is one of those pieces. It's printed on mulberry paper. I love it. My personal routine when I start making dinner is to make myself a cocktail, and I like that to be very close and handy. This is my little orange slicing setup, which I love. Makes it very easy. And the cabinetry down below is really all big drawers because I just love, again, I love my appliances. I love the ease. I really wanted a plain English work table, but that was a bit out of budget. So I went with the Ballard design version, which I'm really happy with. The LaCanche was a total splurge. I always wanted a French stove that cooked everything beautifully, you know, those like roast chickens that you eat in France. I always wanted one. I didn't know if it was a possibility. When our kitchen flooded, we needed something really fast. So these ranges, these LaCanche, these are typically 6 to 8 months out in terms of like getting them in time. And I just couldn't wait that long. So I called the LaCanche showroom in New York. I highly recommend doing this. And I said, send me a list of what you have with some colors and I'll just pick one. And I had the choice between avocado green and this beautiful plum. And I took the plum and I decided to just design the whole kitchen around this plum stove. And then I went to my favorite cheese shop, which is called Bloomy in Dobbs Ferry, which is amazing. You have to go. And she had this beautiful little napkin from Fog Linen. And so I used this as the palette for the whole kitchen. It's all Faro and Ball. The walls are sulking room pink and the cabinets are Payan Black, which are two of my favorite colors. And then I used these colors for everything else. The countertops are so great. They come from a place in Middletown, New York. It's called Rescue Slabs. And it's this young guy. I went to his shop on a really rainy day. It was super fun. He gets a call whenever a big storm comes through and big old trees fall down. Orange and Rockland, the power company, my best friends, they call him and he comes with a big truck and he takes away these old trees and he finds new life for them. He makes floors, he makes countertops, sometimes he makes cabinets. He's super gifted, really, really incredibly talented guy. And it was really fun working with him. And I love that this particular tree, and we didn't know this until he came here to install it. He said, you know, this tree fell down about 15 miles from here, and it was probably about 300 years old. I have right now on my counter this giant zucchini. My friend Josie brought me this giant zucchini. It's definitely giant zucchini season. She does not know this, but as a Vermonter, a zucchini is kind of a joke gift. That might be the case in upstate New York, but in Vermont, the only time of the year, if you grew up in a small town like mine, the only time of the year that you locked your car when you were at the grocery store or at the post office was zucchini season, because if you didn't, you would come back to your car and someone would have given you a bunch of zucchinis. Our little dining nook over here was really fun. I mean, in a big house like this, like you would expect there to be a big dining room, which obviously we're using as a family room. When we do have lots of people here, we make them eat outside, whether it's on the covered porch or on these green tables. We are all outside. Heaters, sweaters, whatever it takes. Thanksgiving dinner, we'll be out there. When it's just me and my husband and my daughter, I really love all of us sitting tightly, kind of close together. I had originally ordered a mural for this room that I had wanted for a long time, and it kept getting delayed and delayed. And finally, I just decided to try to do it myself. So I did this all freehand with really inexpensive acrylic paints from Walmart. Pretty proud of myself. I matched the colors based to my little pansy napkins, and I just went for it. I just decided to freehand it, and then if I hated any of it, I could just paint over. And it was really freeing. Typically, if it had been like a professional commission, sometimes I do like wall and floor painting installations. I'll map the whole thing out, and then I'll print it. I just decided just to run with it, and I'm into it. But I'm also the kind of person, I might decide a couple years from now that I'm no longer into it, and I might do something else entirely. This is like a little bit of a show-off moment, but I got into a lot of different new hobbies during COVID, and one of them, my good friend Carol, has a kiln, and she encouraged me to use it to make some original plates. So I made this little set of plates, and I only made enough for our household, and they make me so happy to eat off of them. I don't know if I'll ever do it again. I got so into it. I mean, so into it. In that way that like you got into something during COVID and might never do it again. It's that kind of vibe for sure. I think this house really informed its own style. There are things that I have tried to bring into this house that just don't work. You know, we've got all of this arts and crafts kind of meets beaux arts, kind of very unique combinations of styles that existed over a span of 20 or 30 years. And those elements really make it difficult to really go too far away from the boundaries. We've stayed in this kind of world of arts and crafts, beaux arts. We're able to bring in some French stuff, you know, that nouveau a little bit. We're able to bring in a little bit of mission. We don't go too far with that. It's a little blocky. Where I've really had fun though, where I've really been able to push the envelope is with textiles and with artwork. I love quilts. I design fabric for quilts, and I think that quilts have a magical warmth that they bring into every room, and they also are really good. A quilt is really, really good at making a grand room feel really accessible and comfortable. You know, quilts have this magic. They're made with so much love. You could never afford to pay someone enough money to make a quilt. The transaction that involves a quilt is, if you want a quilt, you have to find someone and you have to make them love you enough to make you a quilt, because otherwise it just doesn't work. So they have this power in them. They invite people to sort of literally put their feet off the floor and onto the piece of furniture they're sitting on. I find that when I'm feeling overwhelmed by the grandness and the scale of this house, if I put a quilt in the room, it works. I collect a lot of artwork made by textile artists. And I also am always looking for pieces that have a little bit of childhood in them. So much of my goal for this house was that my daughter would grow up in it and would always feel seen, and so much of my work is informed by my own childhood, but I think there are elements of her childhood and my childhood that sort of overlap here because of this place, because we're surrounded by nature. But also, we don't like a lot of serious stuff. Right now, we're on our fireplace mantle. There's a tiny stuffed mouse riding a toy sailboat. We really love to celebrate the joy of childhood. And when my daughter's here, I want her to feel, and all of her cousins, obviously, and my nieces and nephews especially, I want them to feel seen as children. And sometimes that's also hard in a grand house, right? But it's possible if you show them things and if you include things in the decor that they can relate to and that are joyous. So the big challenge out here on our terrace has been to grow moss. I love stone with moss. I like that this is starting to look as old as the house, even though it very much isn't. We love grilling. Well, I love watching my husband grill. These green tables are our party tables. I just had to have them repainted because my family plays a lot of spoons, which involves a lot of banging around, and they get pretty chipped up. But we can squeeze in everybody, which is so much fun. The tables also, I love that we have this sort of joyous celebration on them all the time because they have a little bit of a sad history. This house was lost during the Great Depression by the family who owned it, which was a very sad thing. And one of the other members of this community, his name was John Moody of Moody's Investments, and he felt the rest of his life after the Great Depression, after the crash, he felt a lot of personal responsibility and guilt. And he tried very hard here and he changed his life dramatically after that happened also. But he loved this place, and he bought this house, was lost to taxes. He took it over along with another property that was next door, and he turned it into a summer camp for the daughters of all of his friends who had lost their fortunes in the crash. So these tables were built specifically for my porch. I love. It's sad, but I'm glad that they're still getting use, which means actually, come to think of it, they are 105 years old. It's amazing what you can do with paint. This building, or this side of the building, is actually our gym, which has not gotten a lot of action lately. We're pretty excited about the pandemic, but we'll see. My daughter and I do a bit of surfing. That is a surfboard that I designed for Walden Surfboards for their women's series, which I love. And our boat's still in the water, but that's our little sail. We don't have an outbuilding, so it's not uncommon to walk around this property and see just a whole lot of extra stuff lying around. We put in a lot of the plantings last year, magnolia, or I guess it was 3 or 4 years ago, magnolias and different types of hydrangeas. But I think the real star out here has always been these massive oak trees. We always have families of owls in them, which we love. There's a little fox family over there right now that we really, really love having around. And then if you'll come this way, I can show you the fern pool. The stone porch is big enough to host a lot of people. The sleeping porch you can see from out here means that whatever party is happening on the stone porch down below, you need to be really careful what you say. If the grown-ups are hanging out downstairs, you have to remember that your kids are right above you with screen windows and can hear everything. This is just starting to turn golden now, but it's usually this big pool of green ferns. And I had this wall rebuilt. It was here originally, and I found it in an old photograph, but it was completely covered. So I had it rebuilt. And if you look closely, you can see the edge of the lake down there. But the great thing about this lake community is that nobody's allowed to have a house right on the lake, so that when you're on the lake, you're not looking at the backs of people's houses, which we really loved. And then these are the hydrangeas in question, which there was a long time where this house was just surrounded by green grass, and it was really simple and quite pretty, and sometimes I miss it. But there's nothing like coming out of my jammies with a cup of coffee and picking hydrangeas and filling my house with them. This is, I think this is called strawberries and cream, this hydrangea. They start out white and then they get pink. That's my bedroom window up there with the white geraniums, which are totally fake, by the way. No matter how hot it is outside, it's like this magical feat of engineering. The porch is always exactly the right temperature. I think it has something to do with the stone, honestly. It can literally be 110 degrees. And if you make your way over to this corner in the cross breeze, it's like the perfect temperature, no matter what, which I love. So this is a very popular spot to hang out and have coffee or cocktails. A lot of both of those things have happened here. This is my favorite napping spot on my cot. The older I get, the more naps I take, which I feel like is a win. And then if it is pouring rain and we need somewhere to eat with a larger group, we have this table set out here. I also use this as like a little bit of a workspace, design-wise, in the summer. My professional journey, my career, there was never a roadmap. I think I've always just been really attracted to beautiful places and beautiful things. I grew up surrounded by the beauty that is northern Vermont, that is so special. And I also grew up around a lot of textiles and a lot of things that were collected by my grandmother and my great-grandmother, both of whom lived in Europe and Asia for a lot of their lives and had amazing taste and collected a lot of those things also. I saw in those pieces, I saw this sort of shared interest in these elements of nature celebrated in these really beautiful ways. Everything had this sort of Austrian, Tyrolean, Bavarian, like, you know, the rich, rich greens of Vermont and the bright, sharp pinks of wildflowers. And that's always, those colors have always felt like home to me. And they're very much a part of the, you know, the sort of a Vermont aesthetic. I started drawing and making things with my hands and sewing from a really, really early age. My mother was a painter. My father's mother, my yaya, is Greek. And if you know anything about Greek grandmothers, they feel that it is their obligation to teach you how to do everything with your hands, sewing, knitting, cooking, because that was the way that you found a husband. And she was especially concerned. I looked as though I may grow up to be a little unattractive, and she was fearful. I lacked like the beautiful Greek jawline and the dark skin. She was a little concerned for me, so she would say things like, "You really, you know, this is really important that you you know how to cook and sew, because it's your only shot at finding a husband." So I don't think that's the way it worked out, but I do understand now that those skills were formative in what became my career, as was the fact that I grew up in a very rural place that still had, my high school still had this incredibly serious home economics department. We had the most incredible home ec teacher. She was Mrs. G. And she saw, and I still love this, the premise of home economics was you run your household like a small business. If it's less expensive for you to cook something for yourself or to make a dress for yourself than it is to go and buy it, that's what you do. You have a certain amount of money coming in and you need a certain amount of money to be there at the end of the month, and that's the way you run your household. And that she also believed that there was tremendous opportunity for creative expression through homekeeping. She took it very seriously. She really elevated it. She really added a lot of value to it. So I saw these skills that I had learned really, really young, the sewing and the knitting and the cooking and all of those things. Those felt valued. I was shown value, which was tricky, right? Because my mother was such a 70s single mom and wanted to kind of, you know, she knew how to do all of those things, but she was rejecting them along with a lot of other women in her generation. She didn't want to feel that was how she was identifying, really. So I got really lucky in that way. Those skills those skills were really important to me, and there were adults in my life that really supported that. I think that was really crucial. So what I started doing initially in college, I started making things for people. I made quilts. For a while, I made Gore-Tex ski pants. I went to college in Vermont. I really loved being outside, though. That was always my goal. I really always wanted to be outside. So I had a first career that was about wilderness education. I moved to the West Coast, and I learned about wilderness in a much different way. I started a company after a few years. Working as a naturalist in the state forest. I started a business where I would take groups of women into backpacking and teach them about those skills and try to forge a real connection between them and the natural world. And I loved that work, but I felt so starved for creative work. I just really wanted to do something as creative. That was really, I can still remember the feeling of hiking out, of like hiking down. And those were always really quiet days. We'd go out for these 8 days into the Trinity Alps wilderness, and they were wonderful and fun and social and adventurous. But then I would be hiking out, and I would be take up the tail, like do sweep on the last person on the hike, and I would be thinking about how desperate I was to get home and just make something with my hands. I was living in Northern California at the time, and I signed up at Mendocino College of Arts, which was this incredible school. And there was a teacher there named Lolly Jacobson, and she was Swedish, I believe. And she had the Scandinavians really love the textiles too. There's still that emphasis, that value that they place on them. And I learned from her how to design fabric. I learned block printing, which I'd done a little bit of, but I learned wax resist. I learned silk painting. I learned all of these different techniques, silk screening. And I thought, this is really what I should be doing. This is, I think, what I want to be doing. So then I started, and this came from such an exceptional level of delusion about A, what I was capable of, and B, what was actually possible. I just didn't know what I didn't know. College for me was just something I sort of got through. I had gone after I went to a 4-year college in northern Vermont. I studied politics and ethics and government, and I don't know why. And then after college, I went to Mexico, to San Miguel de Allende, Mexico, which I had visited for a year or so with my mom as a child. And I took some classes in textiles and silver casting, and that was a lot of fun. But I really had absolutely no education or background in anything having to do with garment manufacturing or design. But that kind of helped me. I think sometimes when what you don't know is helpful. If I had any idea how tough that market was, I probably wouldn't have even tried. So I was living in Northern California, and I was living without electricity. I was living in this sort of teepee/lean-to kind of a situation with an old boyfriend, the lifestyle itself was one that there was a lot about it that I loved. I had this beautiful outdoor bathtub in the redwood forest, and it felt really comfortable. It felt, given my childhood, there was a lot of things about it that were really nice. So I had to go down into town, and I had to find a garage to rent. And then my father, who worked in tech by that time, had been on the West Coast for a long time, sent me he said, I really think you need to get on the internet, and I'm going to send you a computer. And the internet was really foreign to me at the time. This was a long time ago. This was the 90s. And he said, no, I really want this for you. He said, I know that you love the idea of living this way, but the truth is that in these sort of back to the land, self-sustaining situations that you're planning, like, the women do all the work. And I think that you have talent, and I think that you're really smart, and I'm going to work really hard to help you get that going, get something going. And he did. He sent me an Apple computer, which I had no idea how to use, and a book called Photoshop for Dummies. And I rented someone's garage for $100 a month. And I learned how to draw with a Wacom tablet. And I designed 5 or 6 fabric prints. And I found a company in San Francisco, Zoo Inc., a silk screening company, and she helped me print fabric from those designs, from those files. And I had those, I knew how to sew, so I made those into some really basic children's clothing. And then I asked someone, my dad had a friend who knew someone who worked somewhere, who it was like a many, many, many steps. And I had a phone call, and they said, you just got to go to a trade show. You have to take all of the dresses and just go to this trade show, which at the time was the way it worked. It doesn't work that way anymore. So I went to the New York International Kids Fair. I had 12 dresses with me, and I had a bunch of order forms. And I had a just a blowout experience. I couldn't believe it. I was writing orders and seeing numbers that I really had no idea. The advice I'd been given was, well, get the orders and then we'll figure it out. You've got 6 months, basically. So that led to my running a children's clothing line, manufacturing it in LA for 7 or 8 years. And I was there. I was the rise and fall of being able to manufacture apparel in California. I saw it start, I saw it end. I sold the brand and to a company that wanted to turn it into a print-driven sleepwear line. And I moved from San Francisco to New York, and I started focusing on fabric. And I started focusing on the world of handmade. It was the early days of craft blogs, and it was a lot of fun. There was a lot going on. It was as though the world had rediscovered knitting and sewing, and I felt like I had so much to offer. And so that started my craft publishing career and my children's book illustration career, and that's what I've been doing since. So let me take you upstairs. That's where our bedrooms are. It's funny, most of the adults that live in this community and a lot of our friends who come to this house really regularly never go upstairs. But every single kid within a 5-mile radius has been on the second floor. And I'll show you why. So this room was tricky. We call it the landing. We've tried a couple of different things up here, but its main purpose always has been to be the home of our dollhouse. Bea and I spent a lot of time. This house has been redecorated a few times. I've redecorated almost every house I've ever lived in a few times. This dollhouse has been redecorated no fewer than 100 times. And even though Bea is 14 now, it still gets a lot of play. We really love it. We have this whole tradition around Christmas where every mouse has a gift. There's a tree that's usually in the attic in the off season that we light. It's a real tradition. The wallpaper is made, this is one of my wallpaper products. We sell this from our studio. We actually print it in-house. This was a vintage quilt that my dear friend, Annabelle Wrigley, an incredible textile artist, found. She's incredible at finding things, and brought it to show it to me. And I said, I think we should photograph this and turn it into wallpaper. And she said, oh, that's a really good idea. So that's what we did. And we love it. And we do a lot of custom installations with it for designers and decorators. And it's always happiest in kitchens and playrooms. That's where people seem to like it the best. We love it. We love the idea. I mean, you heard everything I said about quilts earlier. I feel like walking into this room is like just sliding under a quilt, right? It's kind of perfect. Let me show you the sleeping porch next. We have an enormous amount of girls in our family. Nobody knows why, but we just seem to only be able to produce girls. And at this stage, between my daughter Bea and my sister's kids and our extended family, there are about 19 girls and there's one boy, which is so fun because it means that they can all be together out here on our sleeping porch, especially in the summer. Obviously, it doesn't sleep 19, but these beds have trundles, we have extra cots and day beds, and we have baskets full of quilts, and it's great. This summer for 4th of July, I think we started with 4 people coming, and they all texted each other, and suddenly we had like 15 girls here, and it felt so good to be able to say yes and just know that they were all going to be in here. And they love hanging out up here. I come up in the morning and they're all rolling around on the floor and hanging out, and nobody ever sleeps too late because somebody's being noisy. I was saying we have to be really careful when we're on the porch having cocktails after dinner about what we say because they do a lot of active listening, but we love it and they love it. And even in November, December, when the temperatures get low, we just fire up our little electric stoves and put on a couple more quilts and it stays cozy. I've had my nieces tell me that this sleeping porch is one of the most important places to them in their lives. They're all grown-ups now, and they've been coming here since they were itty-bitty, which is like meaningful for me, for sure. We also have this guy. Bea made this guy in kindergarten. I'm always trying to figure out a way to hang him so that he looks a little more active. People like putting stuffed animals in his claws, which is always a little disturbing. But if I ever build a home from scratch, a sleeping porch will be the first thing on my list. To wake up with the air coming through the screens and the sounds of the birds and the trees, and to be up high, it's just super, super magical. My husband and I both, when we don't have people out here on hot nights, we'll both come out here and sleep in separate beds, which is actually kind of hilarious, but it's great. These pieces are made by my friend Annabelle, who's the one that found the quilt in the other room. She's incredible. A really incredible artist. She and I actually collaborated on a line of solid colored fabrics meant just for quilters, and what she does with them is just, I think, so inspiring. She's really one of my favorite artists. Let me show you the bedrooms. This is the primary bedroom, my husband and I's room, but we often share it with our 2 cats and 2 dogs, which is actually pretty sweet. I would pretend to be annoyed, but it's usually by choice. We watch a little bit of TV in here also, mostly Notre Dame football games because of my husband, not me, but I support. So we needed a cozy little lounge chair, which is great. And it also needs to be a chair that's big enough for the dogs to hang out in too. Otherwise they get really jealous. The bed itself is Restoration Hardware. It's big. I love it. We'd visited this incredible place on Upper Saranac Lake called the Point once for a big anniversary trip. It was a once in a lifetime kind of a trip. And the bed was so comfortable that my husband for my 45th birthday called them and just had them give us every detail. I totally recreated the bed, which was like the best gift in the world. If there's a man watching and he's trying to figure out a really good gift, the best gift in the world. I love just the crisp white cottons. And then this quilt, this is a Denise Schmidt quilt. Denise is really the mother of modern quilting. She's just phenomenal. She's such an inspiration to me and to so many other people. And she's also a very dear friend. And I had this on the wall for many years because it is truly a piece of art. But I wanted to live under it. I felt like I really wanted to use it. And within a year, someone, not naming any names, but not named Heather, put it in the wash. And the wool shrunk up a little bit. And I was devastated, but now I love it. Now I feel like it feels like a geese bend, or it feels like it has some life in it. Everything. I'm sure you're noticing this. Like, look, this is when we first rescued our dog, and he was so nervous that he chewed on my bed. We thought he was maybe a little bit of a pony or a goat or something. I love it. I love those little tears and holes. I do. I don't think I can maintain things to any other degree, so I guess I sort of have to love them that way, but it feels like a life. It feels so real. I'm a big collector of straw novelty handbags purchased on Mexican and Costa Rican beaches after I've had several cocktails. The collection is large. I'm really only displaying a few of them, but I can't say exactly how many I have. Let's just say more than 12. The color scheme in this room was a impulse buy. I saw a picture of a room with a pink ceiling. These 2 colors exactly. They're both Farrow and Ball. The ceiling is Ringuali. I doubt that I'm pronouncing that correctly. And the walls are brinjal, which are eggplant. And brinjal is a really cool color. I've used brinjal before. When you use it in a matte finish, it has this sort of chalky, like it almost feels like a color you would see in Morocco. When you use the gloss, which I did on all of the trim and the windows and the mantle, it looks like the skin of an eggplant, which I think is just so cool. And I loved how this was not intentional at all, but I love how beautifully it worked with this little painting. This is a Hunt Sloanum, who is a really incredible painter. Most paintings, especially by known artists, are priced by size. So as you can see, my budget was limited. I bought it through a close friend, really lovely, lovely man. I bought it for B, and I bought it specifically so that if at one point in her life she thinks that a trip to Europe is more important than a painting, than a physical thing, or if she wants to run away, or if she wants to do something, some amazing thing, she has my permission. This belongs to her to take this painting and sell it and do something young and dangerous and ridiculous for the stupidest reason in the world. That's what this painting exists. And this is a quilt. This is one of my designs made with my fabrics. It's called the Wild Roses quilt. And we're just about to launch a bunch of kits with this quilt in a lot of different color combinations, which we're really excited about. And you can this is a great one if you've never made a quilt before. It's a great first quilt. It's a lot of fun to make. And you can make it to match almost any interior. The ceiling I'm still getting used to, but I think I'm really into it. I think I might need to change the light fixture. This Elizabeth Balanino was my advisor on this. I said, what do you think? I think I want to do a glossy Rangwali pink ceiling. And she said, I think that's exactly what you should do. And I can trust her. She's never wrong. She's such a pro. But I'm realizing now that the high gloss is doing something with the light, and I still haven't figured out exactly how to capitalize on that. But I love it. I love that everything in this room has a pink wash. When I design fabric prints, I actually work on this really pale blush ground because it gives all of my colors a little bit of warmth. And I feel like I've unintentionally done that in here, which I love. This little room, I think, gets the best light in the house all the time. Someday I'm going to steal it as my studio, but right now it's the room that B is transitioning out of as we develop a more like teenager or high school kind of a room for her. I'm the kind of person that says that I'll keep this basically as a shrine to her childhood, but then I'll turn it into something else like 6 months after I swear on that. But it is so special for me to be in this room. If you're looking for the perfect pink, in my opinion, not that you asked, the perfect pink for a little girl's room is Farrow and Ball, once again, a pink ground. It is, especially in a room like this that gets pretty light, it's with a fresh but slightly creamy white. It's just, nothing beats it. And nothing beats it. It's just the best. So once again, we've got lots of quilts. In fact, we have a special dollhouse in here that is not a dollhouse, but a quilt shop dollhouse, which, long story, but was a super fun little project. The strawberry and the apple are both prints that I did a number of years ago. This is Bee and her cat Rexy. We did a little project. Everybody should try this. Creative Bug does this great class on how to make prints in the style of Andy Warhol, where you draw with ink and then you blot it with page, and that's how you get those like bumpy lines, that made up all of his illustration. I'm not doing a good job of explaining it, but Creative Bug does a great job of explaining it. Again, we've got lots and loads of quilts. This one is one of my current faves. This is the postage stamp quilt. We're always getting requests for quilts that you can make for little boys, and this was our answer to that. This bluebird is part of my block print collection. This particular print and a number of others, the block prints we do them in like 108 inches wide. So you can make bedding, you can make duvet covers, you can make quilt backs, you can make whatever you want out of them. But this one is just great. It's just a fun like primary color. My friend Lexi sewed up this sample for me and she did such a good job. She's incredible. These quilters are amazing because they have this combination of an almost scientific mathematical brain and also the sensitivity to color and texture and pattern that is just beyond. It's really incredible. One more thing I have to show you in this room. I found this little lamp on Etsy and it had the cutest little squirrel face you could ever imagine. And I bought it and I almost immediately got a message from the seller and she said, I'm so sorry. I know you really love this lamp, but I think I need to give you a full refund because I dropped it. And now the squirrel face looks really different. Can you zoom in on this? It's the most horrifying face you've ever seen on a squirrel. And I said, oh, no. I didn't see that, but she didn't send a picture. I said, send it. It'll be fine. We love it. People who sleep in this room besides Bee, because she knows the story, are like, how could you do that to me? That was the first thing I saw when I woke up this morning. I've got another bathroom to show you that I'm particularly proud of. This bathroom is shared by all the sleeping porch guests. If you're on the sleeping porch, this is your bathroom. So once again, It's a bathroom that was designed with kids in mind, young girls, kids in mind. Really fun. We also did a little shadow box Barbie outfit on this one. The main activity here when our family comes to stay is swimming in the lake. So we chose the classic vintage Barbie strapless suit and sunglasses. Very popular choice. And then on the inside, we went with a gnome theme. In my childhood in Vermont, gnomes were a part of the conversation every single day. You know, we lived way out in the woods and we didn't have any neighbors. We didn't really have a lot of friends up there on the mountain, but we had this incredibly complex relationship with this imaginary family of house gnomes, all inspired by the original Gnomes book, which was such a formative book for me as an illustrator. I mean, the illustrations in that book and the real magic of that book was that it felt so like scientifically real, like the details and the stories and it was really the thing that made me think someday I'm going to illustrate a book or I'm going to be an illustrator. It was so formative. I went to the extent of, I was really worried about the gnomes that lived in our house because we lived in an old one-room schoolhouse. It got very cold in the winter. I imagined that they all spent the cold nights underneath our potbelly wood stove, so I would leave things for them there. This is a little wool coat that I made for one of them. Probably one of the first things that I ever sewed. I cut a hole in a red wool and silk blend dress that had belonged to my grandmother, which was not a popular decision. And I sewed it, even though it had a little hole in it, and I left it under the stove. And the thing about our house is that between our cats and whatever other animals were roaming around, if you left something on the floor, it was gone immediately, which just made the story better because it always disappeared the next morning. It was great, and that's where you knew it was. This is one of my wallpapers. This is very much an early development piece, but it's meant to, I always wanted to know, and I didn't think that the Book of Gnomes went into this in enough detail. I wanted to know what it was like to be like a teenage girl gnome. That was what was fascinating to me when I was like 8 or 9 years old and thinking about gnomes. So I made up a whole story about her, about how she loves to swim in the river. She hangs up her clothes because she likes the way they smell when they dry in the sunshine. Her pet is probably a woolly bear caterpillar, but potentially also a field mice, maybe? I don't know, not sure. Favorite food, wild strawberries. If you've ever eaten wild strawberries in Vermont, you know why. So yeah, this is our little gnome bathroom. Maybe a little over the top. Maybe in a couple of years I'll grow it up a little as everyone becomes adults, but hopefully they're just all gonna start having kids and we get to all have the same magic all over again. We like to encourage all of our girls to take short showers. So we provide shower caps post trips to the lake. It doesn't really help, but we try. These are my prints, and I ship all of my product instead of using plastic bags, I ship all of my product in this printed Tyvek that's meant to be reused and repurposed, kind of like feed sacks of the olden days. And then people make fun stuff out of them. And my friend Marina makes shower caps out of them, mostly for her family, but she made me a few too, which was really, really sweet. I think the word home to me means a place where you feel safe and loved. When I think of the word home, I think of being in a familiar, loved place with my daughter and my husband and my dogs and my cats. All of us in really close proximity and all of us just feeling a real sense of connection with each other and with the place that we're in. Homeworthy, it was so fun to have you in my home today and such an honor to show you around. I'll see you when I see you.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to go to homeworthy.com for exclusive content, shopping guides, and so much more.